So we would pick up from where we left off. We wrote our first Dart code and we displayed Hello World in the console. At the moment, we're talking about variables and data types. So let us see how we can declare variables and also see data types in action. We would be making use of three keywords in our variable declaration. And then much later, we're going to see yet another way in which we can declare variables. We'll start off with the var keyword. Before then, let us clear out our main method. Declaring a variable with var, we get to start with the var keyword. Then, okay, we see .pad is already telling us what to do next. Here says that our variable is expecting an identifier. An identifier pretty much is the name of this variable that we're trying to declare. In this case, we want to name our variable fruit. There's an error still pending, and that is it expects to find a semicolon. Just as with the print function that requires a semicolon at the end, variables also require a semicolon at the end of the declaration. So we'll add the semicolon there, and we see that the error goes away. But there's still a couple of warnings here at the bottom right. The first is trying to tell us that we haven't used our variable. We just created the variable and it's, well, pretty much there. Then the second warning is letting us know that we haven't assigned any value to the fruit variable. It's pretty much begging us to give fruit a value. How are we sure that the fruit variable doesn't hold any value? We can confirm that with the print function. So we write our print function followed by parentheses and then our semicolon. In this case, for us to see what value fruit um, has in it or what value has been assigned to the fruit variable, we're going to put in fruit as the value or the argument of our print function. So when we click run, we see that the console displays null. That is because truly at this point, the fruit variable has no value attached to it. Now remember the error that we had here that was letting us know that we haven't called the fruit variable? Well, we have called it here in the print function, hence the reason why the warning has, well, disappeared. To assign a variable, we use an operator, an assignment operator, which is represented by the equal to sign. This assigns the value on the right to the variable on the left. In this case, we want to assign the fruit variable a string. Strings are represented with single or double quotes. At the moment, our fruit variable is a dynamic variable. This means that no data type has been explicitly assigned to this variable. So let's assign it a value now. We're going to represent our string with a single quote. Then we're going to give this quote, this string a value. In this case, we want to give it a value of apple. Now, if we go ahead to click run, you see in our console that the value of fruit is now apple. Variables declared with the var keyword have the flexibility of being modified later on in our code. We get to modify a declared variable by calling the variable. We call the variable pretty much by its name, hence the reason why our variables need to be declared with an identifier. Here we have called the variable and we want to modify the value that has been given to the variable. we're going to use yet again the assignment operator and then pass in a value. Watch what happens when I give the fruit variable a value of an integer. Here says a value of type int can't be assigned to a variable of type string. This is because at the point where we declared the fruit variable, we assigned it a value of a string. Hence, this variable is now a string. Assigning it any data type aside a string would definitely throw an error. So we take this out and then we put in a string. In this case, we want to give it a value of orange. Now when we click run, oh, we forgot our print statement. So let's copy this print and we paste it again underneath the newly modified variable. So when we click run, we see that at first we have apple printed in the console, and then we have orange. Apple is the initial value we assigned to the fruit variable, hence the reason why it was first printed. But later on, we decided, okay, let's give fruit another value, which is orange. Hence, the initial value assigned to fruit has been overridden, and we now have the new value of fruit as orange. We take out this first print function and we click run, we see that only orange is printed because orange is at the moment the new value assigned to the fruit variable. Okay, that's it for var. Let's see how we can declare variables using final. It's pretty much the same syntax, but there's something different with variables created with final or const and that of var. When we create a final variable, we also need to give the variable a name. Let's still use fruit. Now, if I were to close off this variable with a semicolon, we see here at the bottom right that it says the final variable fruit must be initialized. This means that we cannot leave a final variable empty. We need to assign it a value. So if we assign it a value of grape, we see that we no longer have an error. And when we print the value of fruit, we get our grape in the console. Now, what if we wanted to modify this value? So we call the variable and we give it yet another value of, say, lemon. We see that pad is already yelling. It's telling us that the final variable fruit can only be set once. This means that once we've declared a final variable, we cannot modify its value. So let's take that out. And we see that we no longer have errors. The same applies when you declare a variable with const. We cannot modify its value later on. It would still give us an error. Okay, that's it with creating variables with var, final, or const. There is yet another way in which we can declare variables, and that is by explicitly defining the data type of the variable at the point of declaration. What do we mean? There are four primitive data types that we discussed earlier: string, integer, double, and boolean. So we can explicitly define a variable by starting off its declaration with the data type that we want. In this case, let us use string, followed by the variable name as usual. Then we're going to still use fruit. Just like the variables declared with var, we can leave this variable and not assign a value to it. It's not as rigid as final or const. In this case, when we're assigning it a value, we cannot assign it a value of any other data type besides the one it has been declared with. This is because at the point of declaration, the fruit variable has been pronounced a string. So assigning it a data type of int or double or bool would definitely throw an error. So let's give it the value of string. Um, let's give it the value of lemon. Then we can also use other data types in our variable creation. We can use int, give it a value of my number, rather a name of my number. Let's just give it the number 24. No errors, right? We're good to go. Same applies with the double, oops. And the same also applies with booleans. So booleans can only receive a value of, or can only be assigned a value of two kinds. It's either you give it a value of true or you give it a value of false. It doesn't accept any other kind of value. So we would also need to name um, the variable. Let's see, let's name it is even. We're asking, is the value even? Then we give it, is the variable even, rather, we're mixing up the words. Is the variable even? We either give it a true or we give it a false. And we have no errors, right? So here we go. We have just talked about how to declare variables using var, final, const, and also by explicitly defining the data type at the point of declaring the variable.